It's Mr. T coming to you live from Scratcherton Square, where some of the brightest light in the Scratch community are putting the finishing touches on their amazing float. For this, our 6th annual Scratch Holiday Parade. I'm joined today by Pico.
Hi there!
Who'll be helping me out with the title cards. I can hear the band striking up, and it looks like our first float is coming around the corner. From the USA, Scratcher Blue Cadbury Chicken has a float called A Divine Phi Holiday. He says the characters Caroline and August are his divine, but he credits TJG Videos for the alien character Divine Phi. This year, some of our float makers have been experimenting with some extra long floats, and here's an example from the USA, a float called Epic Christmas by Number Blocked fan TCF. From Germany, we have a very colorful leopard tank from user TDman007. And from the UK, we have a flying cart called Luke's Techno Cart by Scratcher Luke 2012. And from the USA, here's a very clever use of cloning by Scratcher Malmod14, who's coming to us with the float called Thing Slinger. Also from the US, here's a fun little float called Pupmobile by Scratcher PupPup88. And here's a Nintendo-inspired float called the Goomba Float by Pac-Man598 from the USA. And from the UK, here's a deceptively simple float called Dancing Stickman by Scratcher Rodeo 2013. A simple float with really nice animation. And from the UK, here's Braden31315 with a float called A Bunch of Lights or something. And continuing with the silly names, here's one from the USA called Very Random Float by Scratcher Namegold. From the USA, we have another tank called the Golden Genius Tank by user Isaac Contreras. We've never had a tank float before, and this year we have 2 of them. From Thailand, Scratcher Impossible Boy has a very cool half-pipe setup for this really cool float that I'm not even going to try to say the name of. And from the USA, we have what looks to be another sort of tank by Scratcher Duffman1738. And from Mexico, dressed up in this national colors, we have Mexico Cat by Scratcher SU47 Orca in a very nice looking vehicle. From the island nation of Singapore, we have a beautiful and festive float called the Unique Christmas Float by Scratcher JD Community 2024. And back in the USA, we have what looks to be a Mario-themed float called Alvin's Chaotic Float by Scratcher Silly Chipmunk 7. Lots of great character design there. And from the Asian country of Georgia, we have a really nice float called the Fazbear Christmas Cart by Scratcher Fueled to 778. And from Brazil, we have a tribute to Japanese filmmaker Kenji Yamada from Scratcher Kazuno FXO. Back in the USA, we have a float called The Cast by Bad Coder 453. Lots of very cute hand-drawn animals there. Still in the USA, we have a float called A Run in the Gang from Scratcher Mythical Run, a regular contributor. He says it's the sequel to last year's float. And here's a bizarre square-wheeled vehicle from user Mousehouse1, who's also contributed in the past. He's from the USA, and his float is called Kinda Weird Trio Float. Still in the USA, here's a float by Scratcher Magu Dragon. He's very excited about his new game release called Sonic 4 Episode 3. I had a look at it. It's a very polished game, and it has over 3,000 views already, so we'll go and check it out. From the Philippines, we have this huge Mercedes-Benz truck by Scratcher Mission PGUR USA. And back in the USA, we have a float called Emojis and Cars by Scratcher Emojily1 that should put a smiley on a lot of faces. And here's a very lovely hand-drawn gingerbread float called Ginger's House by Scratcher's Soft Moon Lot All. And from the Philippines again, here's a float by Scratcher Best Gaming Game. And it looks like it features some of his OCs. And here's the tallest scratch cat I've ever seen in a float called Happy Holiday Float by Scratcher J Radical 444 from the USA. I don't like to pick favorites, but this is one of the best floats of the year. From the Philippines, it's an amazing float called a Nano Send-Off by Sash2. Sash says no one knows who designed the float Nano is riding, but it must be someone who liked math enough to slip a math fact in the float. Back in the USA, we have a float called Christmas by Scratcher Blockups. And from Bonnie, Scotland, here's a float called James and Oshiba, which features music from K-pop Demon Hunters. Here's another impossibly long float from the USA. It's The Gamer Guys by Scratcher Gamer Guy 94. Lots of fun characters on that one. And from the USA, here's a colorful float called Candy Cane Float by Tootsie Poppy 13. From the UK, a very high-tech looking train, the Mitsubishi Crystal Mover C810D by Scratcher 24Cat 5C25. Comes with its own train sound effects. And from the USA, here's a float called Chuck E. Cheese by Scratcher Caven B325, which I guess is a tribute to their favorite cheesy restaurant chain. And here's one by a pair of Scratchers who call themselves the OS Mockups Gang. From my home country of Canada, this float was put together by Louis Archives and Elias133. From the USA, here's a float called Blue Nutella Car by Scratch Teams 13. And for all you dinosaur lovers out there, here's a float called Megalodon by Scratcher Xavier Shark 100 from the Asian country of Taiwan. And I have a few floats today from Holy Redeemer School in Spaniards Bay, Newfoundland, where I teach IRL. This one's called Lakers in 5 by J-Law. Back in the USA, we have another lovely use of gradients in this float called The Patrick's Christmas Celebrity by Scratcher GPW213. And Scratcher Chris says he's from Mexico, home of the taco. And his float is called If You See Me, Hi. From Japan, we have a float called The File Friend Float by Scratcher Bossy R111. And from Canada, we have a very creepy looking alien in a float named David by Scratcher David Lamb 123. And on the other side of the world, in New Zealand, we have a float called Gumdrop Jelly Drop by Scratcher CV. And again from the Philippines, which has been a big contributor this year, here's a float called Holiday Sleigh Car by Scratcher Rin Jasmine. Very colorful. From Thailand, here's a float called Meowsers by Scratcher Supercat 12345. There's no float, but it's still floating. This float's called Kitey from Canada by Scratcher Just a Project Maker. And from Malaysia, we have a float by Scratcher YH Animations. It's called Season's Greetings from YH. Also from Malaysia, we have a lovely alphabet float called LMNOP Rules by Scratcher Iman. Really smooth animation there. And from Australia, we have a little bit of a cyberpunk vibe going in this float called KM15 Cat by Scratcher KM15. And what internet spectacle would be complete without dancing cats? Here's a float called B Mahi's Fun Float by Scratcher B Mahi from the European country Luxembourg. And Braley, another one of my students from Spaniards Bay, Newfoundland, came up with this cheeky float called the 6-7 float. And I can think of 6 or 7 reasons why I'm sick of that meme, probably like the rest of you. And here's another train float with a very weird soundtrack. It's from Malaysia, from Scratcher Sufi Sia 24. And this physics-breaking float from the USA definitely wins my Weirdest Float of the Year award. It's called ANV Rides by user ANV100,000. And Peter Colorbox from the USA, he opened last year's parade and he's returned this year with another fire truck called the Return Nobody Asked For. And this year he's added a trailer. Back in the USA, we have a float called iApple by Scratcher Stot35. From the USA, we have a float called My OCs by Scratcher I Love Mario. And also from the USA, we have a float called The Whale by Scratcher I Love Toes, $11.99. From the USA, we have a float called Snowman by Scratcher Haterbell. And here's one from Haterbell's 4th grade classmate, Cole123ABCD, and it's called a Robot. Still in the USA, we have this lovely Pixar float called On Christmas Night. It's by Scratcher Koopa97, who says his float is themed around Hollow Knight, featuring the Radiance, Knight, and a Grub. From Indonesia, here's a float called Happy Holidays by RIFQI Videos. And back in the USA, Parker Plays 74912, who contributed one of the weirdest floats last year, is back with another wacky entry. This one called Subwoofer Boing. Still in the USA, here's a fun little physics float called Marble Mixer by Scratcher Blue2062. And from Malaysia, check out the beautifully smooth animation in this float called Me and Zach by Scratcher Akram's World Cartoon. It's a collab with Zach, who's a Scratcher from the US. Here's a float called The Stickman by Scratcher Sharky2459 from the USA. And I have a few floats here from Miss Mercer's class at Holy Redeemer, my school in Newfoundland. Here's one called Stranger Things by Codus. And also from Miss Mercer's class, here's one called Grayson the Third. And one last one called Sharky, also from Miss Mercer's class, by Scratcher Brady. And from Colombia, here's one with another name that I'm not even going to try. Let's just call it Happy Christmas. And from Australia, here's a float called A May, that's just the letter A, by Scratcher Connor Alpha 2012. And from the USA, here's one called The Christmas Gang by Fredbear 1976. And Scratcher Nintendo Burger Cat 297 has given us something that looks a little bit like a Nintendo Burger Cat. It's called The Coolest Gang Ever. Really nice work. And I'm getting a little Nightmare Before Christmas vibe from this one called Guys, It's Halloween by Scratcher Turtle Monkey 2013 from the UK. Also from the UK, here's a float called Uslobian. Big purple ball of I don't know what. And what's that sailing around the corner? It's the Atomec Studios float. This year we went with a nautical theme to celebrate our new home in Newfoundland, Canada. There's an annual tradition here of decorating fishing boats with beautiful holiday lights, and we thought we'd pay tribute to that. Many thanks to my wife, Miss Lynn, who reimagined these Scratch characters with a little bit of a nautical theme. Well, that wraps it up for this year's parade. I can say with confidence this was the biggest and best parade ever. Many thanks to all the Scratchers who entered, and best wishes to the entire Scratch community. Hoping to be back this year with some new tutorial videos if I can manage the time. I know it's been a long break, but I'm eager to get back at it. On behalf of me and my talented artist wife, Miss Lynn, we wish you all a very Merry Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate at this time of year. Happy holidays, everyone.
I feel the liftoff. The clock has started. Roger.